Hi everybody, Fintan here from Damson Cloud. This week I'm with my colleague Isobel and we're talking about change management, a really important area of our business when it comes to Google Workspace migrations. So why don't we kick off? Isobel, why don't you tell us from your perspective, because you've got a lot of experience with change management, just give us an overview for people that don't know, what exactly is change management and why is it important?
So change management is about supporting your staff through the change that's happening in the business. So with any change that happens, we've been through huge change recently, but if you're making changes to the software that you're using, if you're moving to a different office, any sort of big change to process, anything at all, staff need support through that because it's going to disrupt their comfort. And as humans, we don't like change. No, we're not comfortable with it at all. And so as businesses, it's our job to sort of smooth the process for people, make it easier for them. And it's not rocket science, it's straightforward, but it's something that's really easily forgotten. And the consequences of that can be challenging for businesses.
Yeah, and we've seen it, many times where people don't do the change management in particularly IT projects where it's not. I think it's more common now, but certainly when we started out, it wasn't as common. And we've seen the results of that. And as you say, often projects can fail, because the change management isn't done. What other kind of things have you seen in your own sort of working life where you've seen issues because change management maybe wasn't seen as that important or wasn't part of the overall project plan?
So you can get huge resistance when there's no thought or time given to change management. So people just refusing to use the new tools. I mean, it's a really extreme example, but it can happen. But you can have people throwing up roadblocks and finding all the reasons that the tools don't work for them. And actually they do, but the person isn't comfortable with it. So
they need that support, as you were saying.
And then what can happen is tools don't get used, and a company maybe has made a huge investment into their software, into their new technology, and it's not used, it becomes obsolete, and it's not great use of company resources.
And they're maybe back where they were a few years before looking at some new piece of software because they think, and we've seen this before, where they think the software is the problem, the software is what we need to change. But if there was change management done, then they'd be more likely, as you said, that people will use the tools and get value from them, so that ROI.
Absolutely, and people are missing out on the opportunities that they have. The tools that they've brought in are for a reason, and they have huge efficiency savings, cost savings, and if they're not being used, companies miss out on all of that, as well as investing in things that aren't being used.
So before we kind of talk about Google Workspace and the process we use with Google, because I think that's obviously the area we're focused on, maybe we could just touch on what are the kind of 4 core pillars of change management from your perspective. What's the most important one for you, maybe?
So training is hugely important. I can't choose the most important, Fintan.
They're all really important. They're all really important.
Because communication is key. Things have to be well communicated. People have to know where they stand. Landing things on people with no notice is going to cause resistance because it's going to frighten people. So clear communication is important. Training is so important. People need to know how to use the tools that you're giving them, and they need to understand how they can work. Organisational analysis has to happen because otherwise you don't know what comms need to happen and you don't know what training is needed. And all of that needs executive sponsorship, high level, vocal, visible support for a project. And that high level is important, but also for people to consider influencers within the organisation as well. So someone
further down the
someone might not be super high in the organisation, but they might have a huge impact. And so having them on board can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I remember doing a project here for a creative agency in Ireland. And there was one person who was kind of that connector within the business. Again, not necessarily hugely senior, kind of middle management. And everybody saying, oh, so-and-so's not happy with the move to Google. And I remember going and finding her. We were there on a training day and saying, can I just sit with you for 20 minutes and just help you with some of the challenges you're having? And we sat down, we went through all the different things that she didn't like about Gmail and Google Drive. And I solved 90% of them, you know, with training or guidance or whatever. She'd missed the training day. And at the end, that person actually became one of the biggest advocates. Yeah. And they went out, and I then heard when I came back a few months later, you know, Jane really loves Google and she's telling everybody about it, and she's become this huge influencer, as you said, and kind of advocate, which is interesting that you can often flip that, you know.
Yeah. And when you can flip those people, they have a huge impact. And similarly, in a big change project I was leading on years ago, so it wasn't tech focused, but we had someone who was very negative about it, and I was down doing comms, doing training and working, and had quite a heated discussion with this person in a training session about the change to the approach for the organisation. And actually, by listening to their fears, talking it through with them, understanding where they were coming from, seeing their perspective on it, and then bringing them around to how we were going to move things forward, we were able to flip their viewpoint, and they were hugely influential then and very vocally supportive of it. So.
And I think that, you know, it's interesting, as you say, that sort of, you know, allowing people a space to give feedback, to say, I'm not happy about that. Sometimes that's all people want. They just want to say, you know what, this change is happening, but I'm not delighted with it, you know. and just giving them the opportunity to be able to have a say, or, you know, feeling that they have a say in what's happening. Do you know what I mean? Because often, particularly in businesses, change is kind of thrust upon people. And so it's that element of control we feel is sort of leaving us, you know, and we want to have, you know, a feeling of control, at least as humans, do you know what I mean? So it's given people that space, I think, you know, and you talk about that a lot, I think, when we've talked about this before, that sort of feeling of safety, you know, is really important for employees.
Yeah, people need to feel safe and comfortable so that they can focus on their job and the work that they're supposed to be doing. Because if part of their brain is being taken up by this anxiety about something's changed, something's different, something's wrong, then they're less able to focus on the work that they're supposed to be doing. So if we can make them feel safe, make them feel that everything is going to be okay, they know what they're doing, we make sure they have the tools and the skills that they need to do their job, then they can focus on their job. They can be much more efficient, much more effective, much happier, and that's what we all want for everyone.
And so we've kind of talked about the kind of four pillars. Maybe we could talk a little bit now about the process with Google. Obviously, it's similar. It's those four elements, but just sort of what we do as, you know, as partners, as an organisation, to make sure that those particular areas are covered and followed. So executive sponsorship, like you'd mentioned, that is obviously the core one, and we don't start a project, or we don't, unless there's an executive sponsor. We won't, you know, go down that road because we've been there before. We know it won't work. So yeah, making sure that that's in place, I think, is the first thing.
Yeah, we absolutely need that, and as much visibility as possible.
Yeah.
With that, the more people can talk about how it's a good thing for the organisation, like, yay, we're going Google, but it's a positive thing, it's going to make things better, then that can really just help get everyone on board with it as well.
Yeah. I find the biggest challenge for me, and often I'm the one talking about this in the sales process, and the challenge I found is taking it out of IT. You know, I think it's easier now with large organizations. It's definitely easier, but just trying to say, like, okay, this isn't, we want IT involved in this. And obviously, you know, for people that don't know, we're often dealing with IT teams primarily, but when we get to the change management bit, we're trying to say, like, maybe HR, maybe internal comms, you know, and again, trying to find someone who's an executive who's going to push this out. Ideally for me, I'm always like, can the CEO send the first email? Can they make the announcement? Even if after that it's HR or it's somebody else, I think it just helps the rest of the project to flow, because they're like, well, the boss is behind this. Yeah. So, do you know what I mean? And
it's using the staff that are there as well. Like you've mentioned HR and internal comms, and it's been great over the last few years to see the rise of internal comms as a department, as something that needs to be addressed within a business, because that makes things so much easier. And, you know, obviously sitting here, I love IT people. They are wonderful people, not always the best communicators, if I can just be blunt. There are exceptions, not all IT people, but so having people whose role is specifically around communication on board as part of the project is really helpful.
Definitely. So org analysis, I think it would be interesting for people to know, what is it we do as a business, as an organisation, to help customers with organisation analysis? You know, what is it we're doing in order to get that information. As you said, we don't necessarily know what the processes are. We don't know what we're going to break when we move to Google, and that's what we've got to try to figure out with the org analysis.
Yeah. So there'd be multiple levels to it. So we'd have meetings with key people in the IT teams, in the HR teams, to get a sense of the business processes that are in place.
Technology, the basic stuff.
Yeah, what tools people are using. It's not always consistent within an organisation. We need to see where the teams would like things to be as well. And then user surveys. So the user surveys, they give us two key pieces of information. So the first is people's workflows, the tools people are using, how do they work on a day-to-day basis, and how are we going to replicate that once the change has been made? Yeah. And then really importantly, training needs and people's attitude. So how are people feeling? Yeah. If someone is feeling very unhappy about the whole thing, why? What are their concerns? What are their pain points? And we can then move on to our communications and address those pain points, reassure them, and also find the wins. So we that's really important as well, to find the people who are enthusiastic about the change, the people who can see the benefits, or the people who have issues with the current system that we know we're going to solve. And we can communicate that and share that, and that's really great to be able to do.
I always find it interesting with the surveys that, obviously we've standard questions that we ask, like the tool set that you're using and, things like that. But it's those questions at the end for me when people have kind of filled out the standard stuff and we say, how are you feeling about this? And you have that little comment box at the end that kind of says, let us know what you're thinking. And it's an open question. People can put in whatever they want. But what I find interesting is the consistency of answers that we get across the organization and across multiple migrations in different countries and in different jurisdictions. There's generally kind of 3 or 4 things that come up again and again and again. What's happening with my data? When am I going live? When is the training happening? It's always the same types of...
Am I going to lose all my emails?
Yes. No, people always think IT are doing nothing. Or that nothing's being migrated. I'm always surprised at how many people think that, we're just leaving everything behind and the new system is going to be empty. But yeah, it is interesting. The consistency of the same questions. It's a blank box, but yet there's only about 4 or 5 questions that people tend to ask, so it's the same concerns that people have really, no matter where they're working or what they're doing.
And they're very real and very reasonable. And so it's our job to address them and to give people the answers that they need.
And so then that feeds into the communication piece. As you said, we will change our communication based on that org analysis, based on some of those surveys. We find out lots of stuff that are often a bunch of things that maybe IT wasn't aware of, because people go and use systems in interesting and unusual ways often. So the communication piece, how do we communicate, and what maybe people might not even be aware of the different forms of communication. I know even in some cases we've done videos with customers for go lives.
So we produce videos. For some we'll produce training sites, others it's posters, physical posters or digital posters.
Yeah, less of that with COVID now, but yeah.
Digital posters.
Digital posters, yeah, are a great one.
Slides, presentations. We'll provide information for all hands meetings that can be shared or given out. Sometimes it's emails, sometimes it's newsletter content. So it's really a case of looking at the organisation and how do they communicate with their staff. Usually, what's the best way to reach people, and creating communications for them that fit in with that.
With their organisational needs. Yeah. And one thing I've loved that you've started actually in Damson since you've joined is taking some of that data from the org analysis and sort of kind of consolidating it together, because obviously we could have a deployment of hundreds of users or maybe even thousands, and collecting that together and presenting it back to HR so that it can be even input into some of the communication. Say, these are the concerns that we've seen. And again, we often see consistency across things. So you're paraphrasing, but people are worried about moving their data. They're worried about training. They're worried about how quickly they're going to be able to get back to the productivity level that they were at. And I think if people can see those things, as you say, in the communications after they filled out the survey, they're like, oh, I'm being listened to, and now I feel part of this change. Now they're more likely to kind of get on board. I often feel that it's, for me, and I'm interested to see if you agree with this, I often feel it's a third, a third, a third. We have a third who are maybe at the beginning who are against. We have a third who are for anyway, who are positive to whatever the change is. We got a third who are kind of sitting in the middle. And if we do good change management, we're going to bring that third over in the middle over fairly easily. And then we've got to be really good if we want, we're at 66% or 70%. We've got to be really good if we want to bring that up to 80 or 90. If a project goes really well.
Yeah, and we often can, because some of that is about people being able, by going back to people with the responses, you're able to show people that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And that you're aware of their concerns, and you've got it. Yeah. You've got it in hand.
It's under control.
It's under control. It's all going to be okay, which comes back to that idea of psychological safety. And
the piece that you said at the start, which I think is really important. So that kind of brings us nicely into the last one, which, as you said, is you can't pick the most important one, but definitely one that we really focus on, which is training. You've got to make sure that training is done. And I know from my point of view, again, in the sales process, I do find it difficult sometimes for some companies, depending on the business, to take training seriously, and to say, I'm going to pay for this and this is something that I need, because training is expensive, but that can be a challenge, definitely. I don't know how you find when we're at the other end implementing it. But.
Absolutely, and it's understandable as well, because training companies are having to pay for the training, but they're also having to take staff away from their day job in time. And so that can be challenging. Like scheduling training can be a bit of a nightmare, but it's really worth investing, because if you take someone for a half day's training, but at the end of that half day they know how to use the tools, they know what they need to do, when the go live happens and their tools have changed, they come in and they can just get to work.
Yeah.
So taking someone out of their job for a half day actually pays off, because if you don't do that, you're going to lose more than a half day in productivity for that person. So it's a worthwhile investment. And even for people who are somewhat familiar with the tools, I mean, we're very lucky with our trainers, they're amazing. So you learn new things, new tricks every time you do the training. So even if someone is familiar with the tools, if they do the training, they're learning about how to use the tools in the specific context of their workplace, but also they're learning new tips and tricks.
Yeah, and that's, I often say that to customers. We're not teaching them like how to click compose on an email in Gmail. Like, people probably know how to do that. We're teaching people here how to use Google and Gmail. Often it's focused on Gmail and Calendar. How to use them within their business workflows. I think that's the important piece, because one of the biggest questions that we get back, as we know in the feedback surveys, is how can I get back to the productivity level that I was at before? And I think it's really important, as you said, it's a very valid concern. Do you know what I mean? How can I get back to that productivity? How much is this going to delay me because I'm trying to get this project done or this work done, and this to me is an interruption, for the end user. So.
But actually, it's to make things much more efficient and effective, and that's often the whole reason that people are moving to Google, so that they can work faster and more efficiently and more effectively. And so we need to show people how they can do that, and then they get the most out of it.
Exactly. So I know, go live day is something that we sort of work towards for the change management, but I know you would often say change management doesn't stop on go live day. So maybe you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so go live day that's the big day where your previous systems are switched off and you're fully on the new system, and that's great. But change management can't just stop there, because there'll be people who need a bit of extra support. Once people start to use the tools, they might realise the potential of them and look for more training. So that follow-up is always really important. So the training evaluations can help us see areas for increased training later on, or increased comms. Are there things that people aren't doing that they need to do, that they maybe didn't realise they could do, and we can provide some communications around that. Sometimes we might have a trainer or some support available for the first few days, just for that drop-in extra support. But our goal with our businesses is always that customers feel happy and confident in their tools and they can use them effectively. And so for us, once a customer's with us, they're with us, and we want to support them on that journey.
Yeah, I always say we're not in a transactional business. We're not selling a Mars bar. We're in a long-term...
the chocolate bars are available.
Chocolate bars are available, yeah. We're in a long-term sort of consulting, arrangement where we're going to be working with you on a regular basis. So I think that's important. A really interesting one as an ongoing sort of change management that I saw a customer did years and years ago now. This was at least 7-8 years ago. Was a weekly tip of the week, and they started doing, and it's something. There's a lot of information out there from Google and from ourselves, videos like this, that you can easily take and just send out to your team. And it was the internal comms person for IT that actually did it, and she actually, it was really interesting. She didn't think that many people were reading it. And she went on holidays for 2 weeks, and she came back to a whole lot of emails of people going, "Where's the tip of the week? Why is the tip of the week stopped?" So I thought that was interesting for the days of analytics, maybe. And I think that's a great way of just keeping the change management going. And then you've got new starters as well. You got a team that's changing. So having, making sure people have that onboarding process in place, I think is really, really important as well.
Yeah, and it's around helping people build new habits. New habits and workflows with the new system, so that ongoing support and the tip of the week is a great idea, a great way. It just keeps people thinking about it consciously, and then it becomes subconscious.
Yeah, Google have that cool transforming work site, which is a really good one for a tip of the week, because you can just pick out, there's hundreds of different little tips and tricks in there, and I think they used to use that, just pick one thing and send it out, as a very quick turnaround. The last piece I wanted to talk about was, change management in the case of an acquisition. We've seen that a lot within our customers, where a business is acquired, and the change management can sometimes be, it's the same, but there's also just some key differences. And I'd just love to hear your experience of that and how you think it's maybe a little bit different from the standard.
So the messaging, you need to be a little bit more sensitive. So a bit of empathy for the staff who are going through this change. So as you said, you'll often have a third of the people who are really positive about the acquisition, positive about all the changes that are happening, a third who are in the middle, and you'll have a third who are very unhappy with the whole thing.
And we're changing one part of that. I think that was something you'd said to me before when we were going through one of these with a customer. This isn't the only thing that's changing for them. And I thought that was just like, oh my God, yeah. There's like, all their tools are changing, their HR tools, all of their systems are changing, and they've been acquired by another business. So like, we're just one stream of like maybe 20, so that was quite insightful for me.
Yeah, there's a lot going on for people. So that's where that piece around keeping people feel safe is really, really important. And also, knowing where you fit into it. Like, we're one part of a bigger change. So we have to make sure that our change fits with the messaging and fits with everything else that's going on for people as well. And things like scheduling training. How much training are people receiving on new systems, new policies, new ways of doing things? People are used to their email looking one way and it's going to look another way. That's difficult, but it's not necessarily a choice that people have made to join the company that they're now going to be.
Not even the business has necessarily made. I think the executive sponsorship is interesting too, because is it the executive sponsorship of the new business that's acquired them, or of the organisation? I feel like it's a mix of both.
Yeah, because you really want the business that's acquired them to be super happy about it and positive and showing why the tools we use are great and why it's going to be a good experience. But you also need the people who the staff are used to seeing as their leaders to step up.
Their own leadership.
And because that's who they're familiar with. And so if they can get the messaging from those people that actually this is a good thing, it's going to be good, everything's going to be okay. It's back to that piece of it's all going to be okay. That it's really important.
Yeah, I think if I was to leave one piece from this for people to take away, would be the sort of employee safety, making people feel safe. If that's what you're doing, if what you're doing is kind of helping with that, then you're going in the right direction.
Absolutely. So people shouldn't feel the change.
Yeah, if we're doing it right. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much for taking the time to chat to us. If you guys are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. We're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook as well. So do check us out on there if you're on those platforms. And do let us know in the comments below, what change management challenges have you seen within your organization or business maybe that went through a change? Have you seen any change management scare stories that we'd love to hear? Again, let us know in the comments. We do love interaction from the audience. We will chat to you guys next week in our next video. If you don't know, we do weekly videos on our YouTube channel, so that is actually a great place to subscribe for updates on Google and change management and digital transformation as well.